Hello, welcome to our first edition of True Crime News. And I'm joined by a co-host, and her name is Rachel Telfor. Say hello, Rachel.
Hello, everyone.
And so I'm just going to introduce you to our listeners. So, how did you first get into true crime? What stoked your interest in that?
Oh, well, living kind of a life in somewhat of a true crime area, being from Florida, and having some real life experience. Kind of started me out at an early age, but also I had a friend of mine a couple years ago turn me on to podcasts for the first time, and that kind of really drug me down into the hole and the obsession of true crime by listening to all the podcasts I could listen to. And it's become a kind of a passion, which is, I don't know if it's the right thing to say, but hey, We'll go with it.
Sure, for many people it is. Is there a particular type of story that tends to attract your attention the most?
I think I previously told you, Morgan, in talking offline, and I don't I don't say this lightly. I tend to be somebody that wants to know the worst about people because then I'm prepared for the worst.
Good plan.
So, yeah, I won't lie in saying that the most gruesome and horrifying tales are usually what capture me, and it's because I want to be aware of the human monsters that are surrounding us on a regular basis.
And there's many of those in Florida, aren't there?
Well, we are making jokes, sir. But yes, there are.
Well, they have the most punitive measures apparently for pedophiles down there. Like we once discussed, there's actually, I don't know how many of them there are, but there's one trailer park where everyone is a sex offender.
Correct.
They actually created this space just for them because if they don't live in a place like that, what happens is, and I don't know if this is the case in Florida, but I think it is, not only are you put on the sex offender registry, but now they're doing things like they actually put a sign in front of the guy's house saying that he's a registered sex offender and a pedophile, if that happens to be the case. And so, yeah, they're really going all out. I don't know what they're going to do next, start putting up billboards or what. But
well, I don't know of the signage, but I do know there is a website that you can go to regularly, and I don't know it off the top of my head, but I can get it for you. We can link it if need be, where you can pull up. And I did this where I live now, and I do have two young boys, so obviously it concerns me. Registered sex offenders are not allowed to be in a certain mile radius of schools, of other certain types of areas, but I think the limit is within like 2 miles, which in my opinion is extremely too close. So I pulled up my address recently, and within a 4-mile radius, I believe there were 8 registered sex offenders that lived within 4 miles of me. Yeah, it's pretty intense. I mean, and then the people who like you're talking about, who are hardcore sex offenders, they're known, they've gone to trial, people know them. They actually do. There's a little group of them that kind of live in little shanties, and they have to move around because law enforcement constantly moves them from where they are, so they really don't have a place to be. So that's where that trailer park comes in,
I once had a look at just one sex offender registry for one particular district, and it just was endless. It just went on and on. It must have been like 50 to 100 pages long.
Oh yeah. It's astounding. It's mind-blowing if you really look it up.
Yeah, and they're out there too. I mean, these things are not that hard to track down. They make it public.
Oh, very public, and it's funny because a lot of people don't even. I mean, if you're not a parent, I guess if you're a parent, you're more aware of it, but still, I mean, go check, where you were in Florida last and just pull up that address and see how many sex offenders are around you. It's mind-blowing.
Absolutely. Well, I'm just going to ask you not to touch the mic or the microphone stand because it reverberates into the, like I can hear it. So.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Better?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So my first story actually concerns the famous Gabriel Fernandez case. So what's happening with that is his mother, who is filing for a resentencing petition years after she pled guilty to torturing and murdering him. The way the story goes is Los Angeles Deputy District Attorney John Hatami calls a petition filed by Pearl Fernandez, which aims to get her resentenced for the murder of her own son, Gabriel.
Wow.
So his mother filed the petition in California earlier this month, and she asked to be resentenced after being found guilty in 2018 of the brutal torture and killing of her son. Gabriel was killed in 2013 after months of abuse by his mother, Pearl Fernandez, and her boyfriend, Isoro Aguirre. I don't know if that's how to pronounce it, but the incarcerated mother filed a petition on April 1st asking to be resentenced for her son's murder. She claims in the petition obtained by Oxygen.com that she is not the boy's killer and did not participate in the murder. Pearl Fernandez had pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and to the special circumstance allegation of murder involving torture in 2018. She took a plea deal to avoid trial and to receive a life prison term without the possibility of parole. If she went to trial, she could have faced the death penalty. Aguirre did go to trial the same year and is currently on death row at San Quentin. Los Angeles Deputy District Attorney John Hatami, who prosecuted both suspects, testified that for months they put out lit cigarettes on the boy's body, shot him in the face with a BB gun, made him eat cat litter and feces, and forced him to sleep in a locked cabinet, often while bound and gagged. Gabriel was declared brain dead at a local hospital after being fatally beaten on May 2013. He died 2 days later. The policies and directives from my office and these new laws created by the legislature are emboldening murderers of children to apply to be resentenced, Hatami said in a statement. This is completely unfair to the surviving families and their loved ones. Families now have to relive all the horror that was perpetrated upon a small and helpless child. It is plain wrong and completely unjust. Based upon all the evidence presented at the grand jury, which was made public, and the jury trial, Pearl Fernandez was a major participant in the torture and murder of Gabriel Fernandez and physically assaulted, tortured, and abused Gabriel over 8 months, which led to his death. Gabriel would have turned 16 this year. To commemorate his life, Hatami and some of the boy's relatives gathered at Gabriel's tree in Palmdale, California. And Hatami also said, don't let Gabriel's story, his life, his death, and his trial be for nothing. Children are our most precious resource. You know, I saw the documentary about that whole case that's on Netflix.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, and I could just tell by the mother's countenance, and the same with her boyfriend. They felt no remorse. Like,
none.
You just see the cold malevolence in their faces. And I can tell she feels no more remorse than he does.
As a mother watching that documentary broke me. I was so appalled, my heart, my soul, you know, and our listeners who are mothers or fathers can 100% feel that pain, that how could people that bring a child into this world possibly, number one, do that, and then number two, literally don't have remorse for it. Like, you are just pieces of human garbage and you deserve not to be alive, in my opinion. I mean, that's my opinion. There's just no excuse for that.
And not that their conduct would ever have been appropriate with any child, but this kid was not a poorly behaved child either. He was
No.
supposed to be a very kind, sweet little boy, but they got into their heads that he was gay, that he was effeminate, and they found that idea offensive, and so that's what it started it all.
It brings you to a whole other level of ignorance in this country, in this state.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, and also the whole thing with how the system, social services system failed him too.
Very
Uh,
much so.
it was just so bureaucratic and fragmented, and I mean, some social workers almost went to jail because of that. So they
They
failed
should
him.
have. It was infuriating.
Oh yeah. I think that I believe if my memory serves me correctly, I think he was just staying with relatives for a while, like an uncle or something like that, and
Hmm.
yeah, that was actually a good time in his life. But social workers decided I mean, they feel like basically, unless the circumstances at home are truly, truly heinous, the ideal is that the child would live with their parents. But I think they put on an act to satisfy them so that he could go back.
Well, wasn't that the case where they did have the social workers come to his house,
They did
and
go there,
they
yeah.
did they literally didn't go in the house to physically check on him?
Yeah, that's right. I think I remember that. They just didn't go inside. Or if they
They
did, I
just,
think
yeah.
I think they hid a lot of things. Like when I interviewed a social worker for this show a while ago, that's not unusual. People hiding things, or uh, they they adapt to the system to this in the sense that they're like, okay, so we'll put on an act for these people. We'll do whatever they tell us to do. That'll get the kid back, and the social worker doesn't know if it's fake or not. So the kid ends up back with them. So it's not always the social worker's fault, but
Right. Agreed. I mean, they do good work. I mean, I'm definitely not downplaying the social workers. They're, number one, very overloaded. The case amounts they have are astounding, especially in my state where I live. I know, um, it's a really interesting and hard place to be, because there's so many things being reported, and then you have to make the decision of what's actually a problem and what's not. And I don't want to be put in that position. I wouldn't want to be that person, but I do appreciate the people who do.
yeah, and then there's also the problem that a lot of kids are reluctant to talk about what happened because they still love the abuser. They don't want to be taken out of their home.
Of course.
Yeah, so I mean that's something that a lot of social workers struggle with. I mean, even though the child knows full well that what's being done to them is wrong and certainly unpleasant and painful, they just a lot of them are very reluctant to open up about it. So,
Of course, it's scary. They're young. They don't know any better.
oh, exactly.
It's indoctrination.
Totally. Oh yeah, there's a lot of that. Yeah, there's a lot of manipulation by abusers.
Yeah,
So,
we know that all too well,
oh yeah.
unfortunately.
So what's your first story, Rachel?
So I'm actually gonna bring up a story. This is a story that I personally experienced in my elementary school. Um, it was a really difficult. I believe I was 8 years old. The case just had a break in, oh, what was it? 2010, I want to say. So it is the case of her name was Robin Cornell. Lived in Cape Coral, Florida. This was 1990.
Mm.
She was 11 years old. She lived with her mother and a woman named Lisa Story. They were in Lisa's apartment. Her mother, Robin, had gone out one night. This was in May of 1990. Robin Cornell, who was I'm sorry, it was her mother, Jan Cornell, came home after being with her boyfriend out for the night, returned the next day and found both Lisa, her roommate, and her 11-year-old daughter's body murdered brutally and sexually assaulted and suffocated in their apartment. Nothing happened for a very long time. I remember this being investigated. I remember being a 9-year-old girl who went to school with this girl, and trying to understand what murder was.
Yeah.
At that age. It was very gruesome. The murders were among the most famous unsolved crimes. They were featured in America's Most Wanted in 2010. They did, again, both died from suffocation. They were killed sometime between 11 and 4 before Robin's mother returned to the apartment to get ready for work. She returned to the front door locked, entered the house through the back sliding glass doors, which had been left ajar, to find both of the bodies in the upstairs bathroom. I can't imagine that. Hundreds of people were interviewed over the past 24 years in relation to the case. Finally, DNA, yay, DNA. In 2016, found a man named Austin Ziegler. His DNA was taken at the Lee County Jail, some 20 miles from where the murders took place, and he was arrested on suspicion. Once entered into the police database, it was returned the match with traces found at the crime scene. He was arrested, but at this time, I believe he still has not been sentenced, which bothers me. He's not yet appeared in court. He's facing 2 counts of sexual battery, 2 counts of murder, and a charge of burglary with assault.
So what's holding it up?
I think it's just because it's such an old case that they are trying to make a case to take him to court. You know, that like whole, all right, we have DNA, but we need all we can before we can take it in.
Yeah.
This is one I want to update you with. I just, it's funny because when we first started talking about this podcast, it was one of the things that I thought about first, because this girl's face, I will never forget. The picture of her, I mean, I can see it right now, you know, as an 8-year-old child. It was alarming. And so when we talked about doing this podcast, I'm like, oh, let me go in and look at this case. So I'm going to do a little bit of a deep dive to see where it's going to go, when the case is going to potentially happen, and then update everybody on that, because I do believe that Robin Cornell and Lisa's story deserve to be remembered.
Sure.
She was an 11-year-old girl who was a beautiful person. She had a beautiful smile. She was a ray of sunshine in our school, and there was no reason for her to be, or Lisa, to be brutally murdered for absolutely no reason.
So, and to have that experience at that age, to personally know someone who was murdered in such a grisly fashion.
Yeah.
What was it? How did you process it, or were you able to process it? Like, what was it like for you?
I think I was so young at the time that I didn't really know. I mean, I was kind of naive as a child, lived in kind of a stricter home. You know, my parents were a little strict on me, but there were definitely talks of this brutal murder, and teachers were talking about it, students were talking about it. You know, it was very close. So I just remember thinking, like, it was probably my first real experience with crime, with true crime. So I guess that's why I wanted to start with this, because it was, I just remember going home and being like, wow, like, people can do that? Like, what does that even mean? Like, how can people be that way? it was very jarring. My parents weren't really, they're not, they're, not- they're not super emotional, they didn't really talk to me about it. So we just kind of talked to our friends about it and teachers and you know, the people at the school, the guidance counselors, if we needed to talk about it. So
Did you kind of lose your innocence at that point, or?
I don't think I completely lost my innocence yet. We'll eventually in a couple episodes get to where that happened.
Okay. It happened in steps, did it? It happened in phases?
It happened in steps, Morgan. Okay, so this is the beginning of the future.
Sure, yeah. Well, it's Florida, right? So
I mean, it's Florida, so
a rite of passage to lose your innocence and
I
really.
love the juxtaposition of my co-host and Canada, and then me being completely opposite in Florida. So yeah.
Well, it's like I often say, see, for Canadians, Florida is Shangri-La. It's the promised land. There's
Yeah, it's not.
thousands of people known as the snowbirds. Most of them elderly go down there to winter every Florida, and they're in love with Florida. But most of the people I meet who are from there and or live there hate the place with a passion. It's really interesting.
Well, living here, I will tell you that I mean, I love my tourism. My snowbirds, bring their money in, but I absolutely despise driving when they are here.
Oh yeah, why is that?
They all need to just get off of the road between the hours of 8 and 10 when we are trying to get to work, and
Oh,
then between the hours of 4 to 6 when we are trying to get home from work.
well, they're driving in a very leisurely way because it's
Very leisurely.
it's a vacation, right? So what do they have? What do they have to be on time
Well, they're
for?
going to the golf course or dinner,
Yeah,
and I don't have time to wait for them. And
yeah.
they literally don't look both ways before pulling out into a median because it's just their life and their Bentley. So,
Well, the one time I went to St. Pete's, like my uncle was just pointing out, like everyone else drives really fast down here, and whereas he drove at he didn't drive slow, but it was a pretty, I guess, leisurely pace, and so he had to just wait for traffic to thin out before he drove out to the street. Yeah. So that
yeah,
brings me.
you do to save your life.
And speaking of Florida, my next story is actually about an incident that happened in Florida.
Oh, bring it.
The title of this one is Man allegedly pulls severed ears from pockets while being questioned about grandfather's murder. So,
Oh, God.
Colby Parker, who owned an apron emblazoned with the phrase "the family butcher," allegedly cut off his grandfather's ears after beating him with a baseball bat and stabbing him with a knife. A Florida man allegedly pulled his grandfather's butchered ears from his pockets as he was being questioned in his brutal and bizarre murder over the weekend. Colby Parker, 30, is accused of murdering his 77-year-old grandfather, Ronald Wells Sr., on Saturday inside the Lake County home they shared, the Lake County Sheriff's Department said in a press release. Deputies said they responded to the home after Parker reported that he was attacked by Wells after the pair got into a fight while smoking marijuana. Parker is said to have claimed his elderly grandpa came at him with a knife and that he was able to disarm Wells and use the knife against him. Parker claimed he, quote, acted in self-defense, end quote, according to the release. Wells was found on the front porch of the home with multiple stab wounds and apparently without his ears, which were later found on his grandson. As he was being questioned by police, Parker produced 2 human ears from his pants pocket, which were later discovered to be those of the decedent, the sheriff's department stated. They said that the grandson then became violent toward the deputies, attacking and fighting them and trying to disarm them. He was immediately arrested and booked on battery on a law enforcement officer and resisting with violence charges. As detectives searched the home shared by the victim and the suspect, they discovered a baseball bat in the corner of the porch with what appeared to be blood-like stains, as well as a large butcher knife on the kitchen table and dripped blood on the kitchen floor. Investigators also found an apron in Parker's bedroom with the phrase "the family butcher" emblazoned on it, though it sounds like that's coincidental. Plastic human ears with fake blood were attached to the garment. Detectives say that Parker later confessed to striking his grandfather multiple times in the head with a baseball bat before stabbing him repeatedly with a butcher knife numerous times, then cutting off his ears. He allegedly said he wanted his grandfather to be with his deceased grandmother.
Oh,
After the confession, Parker was also charged with second-degree murder, domestic violence. He's being held on no bond. It's unclear if he has retained an attorney to speak on his behalf.
and how long ago was this?
This was pretty recent. I think it was just a few weeks ago.
Oh my God. So I'm feeling a little Ed Gein vibe here.
Yeah, well, it's funny because pot can trigger psychotic episodes, so it's not entirely safe if you're mentally ill. And sometimes when you buy it in joints, sometimes people sprinkle cocaine or something on it, so maybe that triggered it.
Oh, the next story I'm gonna do actually, we're gonna is a good segue into that, but let's continue on this one because I mean, obviously we know. I mean, name me three predictors of a serial killer, Morgan. What are our three predictors?
Cruelty to animals.
Yes.
A desultory work record. They tend to have trouble holding down a job.
Correct.
Substance abuse is another one.
Yep.
Those are the three that I know for sure.
And then I'll go further and I'll say family some kind of abuse as a child.
Oh yeah.
And my personal favorite, because I do have children and want them to walk around with a fucking helmet on them at all times, is frontal lobe damage.
Yeah, that's true too. There was some kind of brain defect involved in this guy.
Yeah, like when kids get dropped on their head or something, I'm like, oh, nope, frontal lobe damage is not okay. That's totally going to make you a serial killer. So I'm overly protective of my kids' noggins.
Well, there must have been a history of abuse or violence in this situation because
Yeah.
the guy for the guy to wear an apron that says "Family Butcher" and it's got fake body parts glued to it. I mean,
what was homegirl's name that was the butcher? What was our one of my favorite serial killers, the one who totally skinned her husband and hung his skin up and then served his head to his children. Come on, you know who I'm talking about.
I don't think I did that case.
But you're going to.
Well, that's pretty intriguing, I must say.
Oh, honey, I'm gonna send it to you.
Yeah, was that a more recent case?
Oh no, it's older. It's a good one. It's gonna be right up your alley. I can't wait. Hey, Human Monsters fans, you know what I'm talking about. You're gonna love this case.
They must know what it is. I mean, it sounds like something Ed Gein would have done or Jeffrey Dahmer.
It is. She is like the female Ed Gein. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, there's not a lot of female serial killers, but it'd be interesting to hear about that one.
Oh, she's a peach.
When was she alive?
She is not alive anymore. She had a really rough upbringing, a large woman. She was raised in a butcher house, so she cut apart. She was a butcher, but then kind of took it a little too far.
Yeah. Yeah, when you advance beyond beef, chicken, and pork.
Yeah, when you do it to, I don't want to give away any details because honestly, it's one of my favorite, probably true crime stories ever. So I'm gonna put that one on you, Morgan.
Well, there are listeners. I know there are listeners who know like every case. There are people like that.
Yeah, they're going to know, and they're going to want you to do it because you do it only the way you can. So we want to hear that beautiful Morgan voice tell this story.
Thank you.
Of course.
So what was your next case there?
Okay, so going into crazy Florida crap, when this happened in, I believe it was 2012, I was literally stuck to the live feed of this, and I think hopefully most of you know that it was the face-eating bath salts zombie man in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Are we familiar with this?
It sounds very Floridian, but I don't know that specific case.
Okay, so what happened? There was a call about a 31-year-old man. He was completely nude. He was running along a highway in Miami and out of his mind, completely just nude, running around. He accosted a homeless man and physically started trying to eat his face.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So Miami police showed up. They pled for him to stop eating the man's face. The man turned around and growled at them. They did shoot him 4 times. He did not stop. He was on the power of bath salts. So at the end, 75% of the victim's face was eaten away, rendering him almost unrecognizable. It was really, really intense to watch. The man was confirmed to have some sort of bath salts that he had taken, exhibiting classic signs of someone high on the drug. So the president of the Miami Fraternal Order of Police, who had been in contact with the officer who killed Eugene, says the similarities between this and other recent cases involving bath salts were striking. So at this time, this is when bath salts, I believe, were sold in Florida, because, hi, Florida, let's be fucking ridiculous. And let's just sell this shit in, gas stations, essentially.
They sold them in gas stations?
I'm not even kidding. It's the synthetic weed and all that. This is what caused this craziness.
So this is not drug dealers on the street. This
no. This is legitimate. Like, you could walk in. I mean, like the synthetic pot and this kind of stuff. It was just insanity. So the cases, it says the cases similar minus a man eating another. People taking off their clothes, people suddenly having superhuman strength. They become violent. They felt like they were burning up from the inside out. So that's why they took their clothes off, because it was almost like, when you're so cold that you feel like you're on fire. I've heard some of those stories. Their organs were reaching a level that they would die. So by the time the police approached them, they were a walking dead person. They were legitimately the closest thing you could get to a zombie. The man he attacked was 65 years old. He was a homeless man living near the causeway where he was attacked. He left a few clues as to what led to the attack. I don't think there really was a reason. I think this man was just completely out of his mind. They poured over surveillance videos. We all did. This was live. There was a helicopter above this, and it was the most disturbing. If any of you want to be, you little human monsters, if you want to go look at this, you can YouTube this video, this scene, and it's intense.
So did they ban bath salts eventually?
Yes, so they did. So they called it like the new LSD as a recreational drug, but it wasn't. They get very aggressive. They're stronger than they usually are. In the emergency room, it took 4 to 5 people to control them.
Jesus.
This is the kind of stuff, that we were dealing with.
Oh, yeah. So, I'm thinking, so you used to, you created that big event, that zombie event. So if you guys had sold bath salts, maybe you could have had some legitimate zombies, right?
Funny thing you say, because I was one of the organizers of ZombieCon. If any of our listeners know what that was in Fort Myers, hey, even though it ended on a bad note, I did do 9 years of pretty epic, very calm and not a lot of problems up until the last hurrah. Yeah, I mean, that was a concern for us. And not to get off topic, we did hire, we had to pay for police. We had to hire our own security guards. We had a lot of security there. So it was mostly, up until the last year, a very safe event.
Oh, boy. So bath salts are basically the biggest threat to safety in Florida until recently. So now you can't buy them at all?
No, you cannot. And this man ended up, okay, so citing an imminent threat to public safety, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency banned in 2011 for a year the possession and sale of 3 chemicals used to make the drug, as they determine how best to combat the growing problem. So it did lead to, some restrictions, thankfully, from the government of not having human zombies be attacking people and eating faces in Florida. So, hey, win.
Yeah. God. I just wonder who came up with the idea originally to use bath salts to get high of. I mean, maybe there are people just try everything. I don't know, but
I mean, if you go look, which I have gotten into, like a YouTube like dive of people doing bath salts, it is one of the most terrifying things you will ever watch in your life. Ever. I mean, I'm talking, I've seen people on heroin, everything else. Bath salts? That's where I'm a little concerned. A little concerned for our society.
Well, some people get crazy with the drugs, like in Canada, we have this candy called Smarties. They're similar to M&Ms, but there's some differences there. But at one point,
are you talking about Smarties that come in the rolled up pack that are like?
Well, some of them come in a cardboard box, and others come in a bag.
Oh, okay.
Different colored shells. Anyway, so these Canadian kids, they would have these parties called Smartie parties where they're at somebody's home and they take all the parents' pill bottles, dump all the pills in a bowl, and they just grab a handful and stuff it in their mouth. Who knows what kind of damage it would do, but some kids when they're young, they just do crazy shit like that, I guess. So.
Okay, thanks. Now I'm going to go to bed and never sleep again because I have children and this is probably going to happen. And thank you, Morgan.
Well, they'll probably just smoke pot.
Thank God.
Yeah. Well, they don't know what they probably don't know what Smarties are.
Anyway. They're never going to know what Smarties are.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Unless they're the ones that come in the little wrapped up, package, the little actual Smarties.
Well, I haven't heard about M&M parties, so that's good at least.
Okay, let's keep that safe. Let's keep M&M sacred. Let's keep M&M sacred for the love of God.
So my next story, this is a pretty serious story, I guess. So domestic violence reports continue to rise due to COVID-19 pandemic. The second wave, this is pertaining particularly to Canada Canadian statistics. The second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic did not stop a rising tide of reports of domestic violence, experts say, warning that the stress of life in lockdown continues to put victims at risk. Canada's Assaulted Women's Helpline fielded 20,334 calls between September 1st and December 31st, 2020, compared to 12,352 over the same period the previous year, said Yvonne Harding, manager of resource development at the organization. She said, it's very disturbing to know that there are so many women who are in this really precarious situation. There may have been limited support for them beforehand, but at least they had outlets. She said opportunities to leave the house to get help, such as daily trips to and from school, have in many cases been eliminated during the pandemic, Access to friends and family has also been cut off, she said, leaving victims with fewer options. Call volumes spiked almost immediately when swaths of Canada first locked down. Between April 1st and September 30th, rather, the center received 51,299 calls
Wow.
compared to 20,010 calls at the same time in 2019. She said everything closed overnight and our crisis lines lit up. We saw a range of calls. We saw those who were feeling immediately threatened because their situation had escalated, and we saw those for whom fears were kicking in because things were starting to change, and they were used to being able to access community supports in person that were no longer available to them. The Assaulted Women's Helpline has had to expand services and has received government funding to do so. Police, too, are seeing a spike in domestic-related calls, albeit not as pronounced. Data from 17 police forces across the country show that calls related to domestic disturbances, which could involve anything from a verbal quarrel to reports of violence, rose by nearly 12% between March and June of 2020, compared to the same 4 months in 2019, according to Statistics Canada. It also showed reports of assaults by family members dropped by 4.3%, and reports of sexual assaults by family dropped 17.7%. The Ontario Provincial Police did not provide data about domestic incidents. Intimate partner violence and mental health are often closely connected, and from what's been reported worldwide, the pandemic has had a profound effect on people's mental health. And statistics tell us that domestic violence goes on long before someone actually picks up the phone to call the police. So this one person said, so anecdotally, I can say that often our calls are lower than what's actually happening in the community. So it's interesting. The sexual assault went down, but the physical assault went up.
Right.
So I guess, I don't know, a lot of these people are sick and tired of being around their partner so much, so losing interest in them, I don't know. So there's just, I guess it's just like a matter of familiarity breeding contempt. So,
well, I mean, I kind of saw that coming, to be honest. And being somebody, we'll go ahead and put this out here, guys. I'm a cool chick, but I do suffer from ADHD, generalized anxiety disorder, maybe a little PTSD. But I have myself pretty much therapeutically, see a therapist and I'm drugged, so I'm good. However, I think about this when this pandemic started, these people who are stuck in a situation, in a home, even children, mothers, fathers, whoever, in an abusive relationship and they can't get out. That's terrifying. That's scary. To not be able to get out of an abusive relationship during a pandemic. That's new. This is new. We don't know how to handle this.
Well, the last time there was a really serious plague like that was centuries ago.
Centuries ago. And now it's like, what do you do? Like, how do you handle this? We don't have enough mental, help as it is in this country, at least in my country.
Well, during like the Black Plague, there was no place for women to go even before or after.
Correct.
So I guess it would have been even worse back then. So.
Yep.
But I don't know. It didn't say anything about how much children are being abused, though I have read that that's gone up as well. I think all the most different forms of abuse have definitely gotten worse. People are frustrated about, just watching COVID shit on their dreams, basically.
Yep.
It's not okay to take it out on those around you. But I know it's certainly something that's frustrating me. There's lots of things I want to do that you just can't do right now because of the pandemic. But yeah, I think it's definitely taking a toll on most people's mental health.
It's absolutely 100% exacerbated many people's mental health. thankfully, and we don't have sponsors, but like there's places like that are online that you can seek therapy. You don't even have to leave the comfort of your house. Totally recommend that to people who are suffering. Don't be a hero. Reach out to somebody that can help you for sure.
Well, it seems like one way to cope with it is do you know about Hygge? You ever heard of that?
Yeah, I have actually.
Yeah, so that's for those of you who don't know what that is. It's this concept kind of created by the Danes and people in Denmark. So it consists of basically just setting aside part of your day where you're just reveling in comfort, whatever that means for you. You relax, you enjoy doing whatever it is you like to do, something you like to eat, a favorite beverage or whatever. And I think big part of it's relaxation, but they actually make a point of setting aside part of the day just to enjoy themselves. And the Danes are some of the happiest people in the world, so maybe that's a way to cope with the pandemic. Like I know a lot
Have
of
you
people.
found that helpful to you?
Well, I think it's been helpful to I think one thing that's common. I think people are watching a lot of Netflix. Just take your mind off it. Watch your favorite movies or TV shows, and I've been rewatching my Golden Girls DVDs, and so that's entertaining.
Let's all just stop for a moment, okay? For those of you who listen to Human Monsters and listen to Morgan like I do, loving his voice and his very soothing cadence, let's just all talk about the fact that he watches Golden Girls for fun, okay? This is the Morgan that I want you to know.
I have a T-shirt too. Yeah.
It's the greatest thing in the world. So when we first talked, I'm like, wait, Morgan Rector is listening to Golden Girl, watching. Yes, we are spirit animals. This is my man right now.
Well, I watched it with my grandmother when I was a kid in the 80s.
Love it.
And it's not just a show for women. I don't think it is. Or
Oh
for
no.
It's a really funny show, I think, and I think actually a lot of people of different generations enjoy it.
It was brilliant writing, just like Roseanne was one of my favorites. Brilliant writing.
Oh yeah, I love Betty White, and she's great, and it's great to see that she's probably going to turn 100, and that's really cool.
Well, she's a national treasure, and we have to save her at all costs.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
100%.
So what's your next story?
Oh my gosh, let me find my next story. So I'm just going to put this out here that I thought we were recording next week, so Morgan has me completely unprepared, but I'm riding by the seat of my pants because I am a single mother who works 47 jobs. We're going to go with it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was getting ready to do this one. We're going to save that for next week. Hold up. So I wanted to save this for a future episode, but I'm gonna mention it just because it came up in recent news locally for me, and I hate to do another local story, but it was very true to me. When I was in high school, which was 5 years ago, and by that I mean 25 years ago, we had a really big, crazy thing that happened that got international news. It was a gang called the Lords of Chaos. Morgan didn't know of it, but I think probably some of our USA people might have known about it just because it was kind of a big deal.
Were they typical street gang like the Bloods and the Crips?
Not at all. Completely the opposite. They were three very kind of nerdier, not laid back, just kind of really, I don't want to say goth, because it technically wasn't goth yet, but just, not the most popular kids in school. And, the ringleader, Kevin Foster, kind of led the other two along, I think. So what they had done is they started this quote unquote gang called Lords of Chaos. And in our town, they went on a little crime spree, if you will. They burned down. We had uh, it was a Coca-Cola plant that was super old. It was, one of our beautiful historic buildings. They burnt that down, and they decided to steal a bunch of things from around town. They broke into places. They lit fires in other buildings. They let off grenades. One night they had decided that they were going to break into our high school where I went.
Mm-hmm.
In the middle of that, one of our teachers, who was a beautiful, beautiful man, young man, he was 32. He was a band director at my high school, caught them breaking in.
Mark Schwabes was his name. How do you spell
Yeah,
it?
his name was Mark Schwebes. Yeah, he was 32,
Schwabes.
band director at Riverdale. He caught the members. They were loitering on the school grounds. I guess they were trying to steal like staplers, a fire extinguisher, just ridiculous. And he had, angrily run them out. So they left and got very angry with him. And then they decided to have a plot to kill him. Approximately 11:30 on the night. Oh, what was the night? Hold up. Where'd it go? April 20th, 1996. Don't correct me if I'm wrong with that, guys. As approximately 11:30 p.m., Mark heard a knock at a door. Open it. He received an immediate blast to the face from a Mossberg 12-gauge shotgun, which authorities believe killed him instantly, thankfully. Kevin Foster, who was the ringleader of the quote-unquote gang, shot him a second time in the buttocks because he wrongly perceived him to be a homosexual. Mistakenly believing that it was impossible to trace shells back to his shotgun because it was a smooth bore weapon. Foster left the 2 spent shotgun shells at the scene.
Ballistics experts don't exist, right?
Well, yeah. So apparently a homophobe, thinking that Mark Schwebes was, a gay male. Whether he was or wasn't, I don't know if that was even confirmed. Like I said, they did bomb a Coca-Cola bottling plant. Eventually, they did get charged. Kevin Foster is right now currently on death row in Florida. It's been 25 years. His death sentence keeps being pushed back because, Florida.
Yeah.
The 2 other suspects, I honestly, if you look into it, I feel very bad for them. I think they were young kids that were in a really just crappy situation led by a psychopath. Derek Shields was one of them. And, what was the other one? Hang on. Shields. He pled guilty to murder. He is, I think, life imprisonment. He has done some what do you call them? What we're doing now.
Interviews?
Thank you. Thanks, Morgan. That's what you're here for. To remind my 40-year-old brain of what I'm thinking about. He's done interviews, and I don't believe that they're really horrible people. I believe that Kevin Foster deserves to die. I think he's an absolute piece of human garbage, and I don't give a shit what happens to him. But I do feel a little bad for the guys that kind of got caught up in that teenage kind of wanting to fit in, you know. One of them was the getaway driver, and then I believe Derek Shields was the one who tried to stop him. But when somebody pulls a gun out in front of you, you know, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
But I want to leave that by saying that Mr. Mark Schwebe's was one of the most amazing people. As a teenager that I knew, he was just absolutely a wonderful human being. And on the 25th anniversary of his death, I'd like people to not forget this and remember this, and still remember that Kevin Foster deserves to die in death row.
And you had Schwebe's as a teacher, did you?
I personally did not, but I did very much know him. He was just kind of an exuberant, wonderful, delightful teacher that kind of knew everybody. So we all knew him. It rocked our school. It was pretty.
Oh, for sure.
We had counselors on hand. It was ugh, not something I wish on people. But now we have mass shootings all the time, so.
Did they hold like a tribute for him, like as an assembly or something like that? Or?
Of course, absolutely, we did. We had a beautiful ceremony. We were all there for each other. Great group of kids that year. We were all pretty close. Very thankful of the teachers and staff and counselors and students that held each other up. It was in the face of a very, very brutal and horrible thing. Community came together. So, that was kind of a beautiful moment to be there for each other.
Yeah, and that had elements of a hate crime, and the next story I'm going into is a hate crime.
Oh, perfect segue.
Yeah, the heading is Iowa woman pleads guilty to hate crime charges for attempting to kill 2 children because of their race and national origin.
Oh, God.
So, she pled guilty in federal court to hate crime charges because she attempted to kill 2 children because of that. According to her admissions, Nicole Poole Franklin, 42 years old, that she made during the hearing on the afternoon of December 9th, 2019. She was driving her Jeep on Preston Avenue in Des Moines, Iowa, where the first child victim was walking along the sidewalk with another younger relative. Upon seeing the children and believing that the victim was of Middle Eastern or African descent, Poole Franklin drove her vehicle over the curb towards both children, striking both of them. Poole Franklin then drove away from the scene. The assault resulted in injury to the victim, including cuts, bruising, and swelling. Approximately 30 minutes later, Poole Franklin was driving her Jeep near Indian Hills Junior High School in Clive, Iowa, where the second child victim was walking on the sidewalk. Poole Franklin, believing the child was Mexican, drove her vehicle over the curb and struck the victim, causing serious injury, including concussion, bruises, and cuts. Poole Franklin drove away from the scene but was apprehended later that day. So there's a quote here by a Deputy Assistant Attorney General of Iowa. Nicole Poole Franklin attempted to kill 2 children because she thought they came from another country. All people in the United States, regardless of where they came from, have the right to be free from fear of violence because of who they are. The Justice Department will continue to protect the civil rights of all individuals and prosecute hate crimes, as we have done in this case. Our office will vigorously pursue civil rights prosecutions against individuals such as Miss Poole Franklin for hate-motivated attacks. And it's quite amazing, this thing I've noticed it's going on in the States for a few years now, is that people like that are incredibly bold now. They're very open about it.
Well, yeah.
Do you find that happens in Florida a lot, where people are just coming out with these, racist, verbal attacks or physical attacks, and they're just not bashful about it anymore?
Well, I mean, if I'm going to be honest in this podcast and not, I'm going to try not to be political, okay? But I am going to say that in the last administration that we had, I do believe that it empowered people who are already racist to not hide their racism. It's still very much a problem. I see it all the time, especially living in Florida. Unfortunately, there's some members of government that don't want to acknowledge that it's a problem.
Yeah.
But it is a problem. And it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's important for politicians to conduct themselves with a certain amount of decorum, to set an example in terms of morals and conduct. It's funny because I remember in that documentary Bowling for Columbine, Marilyn Manson said the president is more influential than he is. And I thought, well, that's not true. I mean, nobody really, copies the president. They don't really model themselves after the president. But yet that's been happening in the last few years. Like during Trump's presidency, there are a lot of people who really kind of modeled themselves after him and behaved in ways that were reminiscent of his philosophy and at its worst, I'll say. So yeah, it does matter how politicians conduct themselves.
Well, and he does it with a way, I mean, as the president of the United States of America, having that power and that voice, saying what you're saying and doing what you're doing is a big deal.
Do you have friends of other races who have experienced racist incidents lately?
Oh, 100%. Oh, on a regular basis. On a regular basis. It's not even hidden half of the time. It's quite disgusting. But all I can be is an advocate and try to teach my children better. But part of that is, I always want to be able to respect that we have respect the president. But this was somebody that I could not let my children listen to when I'm listening to my NPR or BBC news.
Yeah.
And have them listen to this man speak like, Mom, is that Trump? And I'm like, yeah, buddy.
Well, and it's not just people. It's not just people in the media, but there's also people out in public that they're going to see who are, exhibiting that kind of behavior and those attitudes and
of course,
kind of example. And they're not always going to have you around. So, those influences are toxic and they're out there,
Well, I mean, my kids come home and tell me that, they're 7 and 9. Oh, well, my friend said that President Trump's a great president. I'm like, well, that's their parents saying that. So, hey, it's okay, buddy. You just don't get into a conversation with them. It's fine. You just, steer away from that conversation.
Well, the sad thing about those kids who are kept in the cages, a lot of them, they've never seen their parents. They'll never see them again. Like, that was such a mess, which is really tragic, I think. That is such a sad thing.
So, it really is. I mean, yeah, the DACA problem and the children ripped away from their parents. And, Florida's just a hot mess. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Well, didn't the events of Scarface, weren't they based on real incidents? I mean, that character's fictional, of course, but the whole thing with the Cubans coming in, that's kind of based on real life, right?
Listen, first off, pretty sure that whatever my Cuban or any kind of like crazy drug lord that's going on down wherever that's going is probably worse at this point. Drugs aren't going anywhere.
Well, I mean, you take some people and you force them to live, in camps while everyone else in the country is living in, regular dwellings. I mean, don't be surprised if some of them end up acting like animals, right? Like caged animals.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, they criticized the Cuban government, but when their refugees went there, they didn't exactly treat them any better either.
No, they didn't. No,
No.
they didn't. And where else? I mean, if I were stuck in a place that bad with my family, guess what? I'd be trying to get them out too.
Oh, too. Oh, totally. And you
I mean,
mentioned,
I'm about ready to move to Canada to get away from the U.S. So, I mean, I hope you have a couch.
yeah, we have a couch, yeah.
Oh, Lord help me.
So I have a story here. You mentioned a female serial killer and butcher earlier. This is a female
Yes.
offender. This woman in Reading, Pennsylvania, is sentenced to 15 years in prison for sex trafficking children. So it's usually men, but there are a few women who do
Ooh.
this. So, yes, Melissa Madera, 27, of Reading, was sentenced to 15 years in prison and a lifetime of supervised release by United States District Judge Joseph P. Leeson for multiple child exploitation and sex trafficking offenses. In September 2020, she pleaded guilty to 2 counts of sex trafficking minors and 1 count each of distribution, receipt, and possession of child pornography.
Wow.
The charges stem from Madera's trafficking of 2 children, a 15-year-old girl and a 17-year-old girl, from about August until October 2017. She forced the girl to engage in commercial sex for her own financial gain, aka prostitution, all while plying the minors with drugs like ecstasy and cocaine to ensure their compliance. Sometimes one of the girls would not make it to school the following day because she had been given so many drugs the previous night.
And
Madera,
how old were these girls?
15 and 17.
Oh,
And Madera also obtained a sexually explicit image of one of the girls and used it on a commercial sex trafficking website, advertising the minor for commercial sex acts, and using locations like the Quality Inn in Wyomissing, Pennsylvania, and the Days Inn, Klein's Motel, and Roadway Inn in Reading, because motels do tend to be the places where a lot of these incidents happen. The defendant would rent 2 rooms at the hotel. One room was for the commercial sex acts, and Madera would stay in the other after meeting the sex buyers and charging a fee of $200 per hour. After the 15-year-old's mother reported her missing to the Reading Police Department in October 2017, Madera confronted the girl and assaulted her, stating, "This is what you get for being a rat." The crimes committed by this defendant will physically and psychologically impact her victims for years to come, said an attorney. Madera advertised these children like objects and plied them with drugs so she'd be more easily able to control them. Her behavior is horrifying, and she deserves every single day of that prison sentence.
Mm.
So this woman's just clearly a sociopath.
So interesting because she's a female. So that's not typical, right?
No.
In these kind of scenarios. My other thought when you tell me this is, when are we going to be able to find these websites that are trafficking children? Like, how are we not able to do this yet?
Well, it's the dark web, these people, they are very savvy with internet-based technology.
As I have heard.
Well, yeah, I heard about this software called Tor, and what it does.
Yeah.
It's basically, it's like it makes you invisible online, so no one can track your movements.
Yep, no tracking.
But yeah, you don't access these areas, just like casually, like going to Google and finding them. It's you have to have connections, and it's supposed to be a very complicated thing.
It's absolutely terrifying.
Well, I read this story about a girl who was kind of like Clarice Starling in Silence of the Lambs.
Yes.
She was still a student at the FBI, but I think when they're getting closer to graduation, they do start to investigate real crimes. So her task was to infiltrate the pedos who sell and make child pornography and who actually engage in child sex trafficking.
Yeah.
So she said that it's hard to get in. You have to have child pornography to show them so they know you're legit. And it took a long time for her to get through. But then finally she met a woman there through a chat applet. And the woman said to her this thing, and I'll never forget this. She said,
Hmm.
Me and my husband have some kids, and we're raising them pedo.
What the fuck does that mean?
Well, they're sexually abusing them, and it's
What?
intention from the get-go. Yeah,
What do you wait, back the fuck up. What?
yeah, that's fucked up, eh?
She said
Yeah,
they're raising their children as pedo as if it's a lifestyle?
well, yeah, like basically they were having sex with their children and normalizing it in their household.
Okay, well, you know what? That takes you to immediate just death. You can't be rehabilitated.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Yeah, actually, the Paul Bernardo Carla Homonka case,
Oh god.
that almost happened. I don't know if I mentioned it in the show. That was so long ago, it was 2 years ago. But they were shooting these home movies on their honeymoon in Hawaii. And at one point, they started talking about having kids. And Carla said to him, "You're going to fuck them all, aren't you?"
I
So,
remember that.
yeah,
that.
which is another. So every time she's tried to play Miss Innocent, battered wife, nobody's bought into it. Canadians hate that chick.
Well, and now Carla is running free with a new identity.
Yeah, she's in Quebec because they didn't follow the case very closely. It was mostly something that English Canada paid attention to, but there are people in Quebec who know who she is. There are Anglophones, English speakers there. So, yeah.
Has anyone tried to call her out at all?
Oh, yeah, and people have taken pictures of her. She was volunteering for a kids' school, and I think
I heard.
Yeah, some parents definitely objected to that. So, as you can imagine,
I wouldn't let her near my child with,
well,
from Florida to Canada, honey, stay away, because Mama Bear will get you.
Oh, yeah, she was. I mean, it was just because of bad. I think it was because of Paul Bernardo's lawyer retaining the videotapes for a long time that she was able to make that plea deal. Because if that hadn't happened, she would still be in prison as we speak, as she should be. So.
I also believe she should be. It was mind blowing when I found out that she was released. Just absolutely disturbing. But I will say this about, Florida's a shit state, not gonna lie. But after listening to a lot of your Canadian stories, what really is a hard problem for me is that you do have a lot of more lenient sentences when it comes to some of the crimes, like murder and rape and all that kind of stuff, than we do here.
Yeah, well, murder is a 25 years.
25, right.
Yeah. So if you kill one person, that's the typical sentence. But it depends on the individual too. Like Bernardo not only killed 3 people, but he committed a lot of rapes, and so he got that designation, dangerous offender. So
right. That's what I've learned listening to your podcast, is the differentiation. But my question is, do you find that a just system, or do you think that it should be harsher penalties for certain things?
It seems just to me. I haven't. Like with the Tory Stafford case, Terry Clyn McKintic almost went to what they called an Aboriginal healing lodge for women, but they just felt like this girl participated in an unbelievably heinous crime. She doesn't deserve to be in such a compassionate environment. So, I was as outraged about that as anyone else was. So, yeah, maybe it does get a little too soft sometimes, but I think ultimately it's, I don't know, I guess people get what they deserve here in terms of those charges. So.
How do you feel about the death penalty that we have here?
Well, we don't have it here.
Here, in general, like if you, like, what are your feelings on that?
Well, isn't it more of a punishment to keep them alive for a long, long time,
Absolutely.
It does cost a lot of money to, I think it's like a minimum of $40,000 a year to keep an inmate alive, everything from food and clothing to medical care. But on the other hand, you're punishing them. It sucks
Hmm.
to be in prison, unless they become an animal in their own right in order to survive, which a lot of people do. But yeah, that seems like more of a punishment to me, whereas a lot of people commit suicide in jail, so obviously death would be a relief,
Yeah.
unless you were actually innocent, in which case it's pretty tragic. But
Very much so, and that's where I kind of have my issue with it. But forensics have come a long way. I kind of
well,
don't know
like
where I stand on it. So,
there was like the West Memphis 3 case.
oh,
Damien,
tough case,
like,
tough
oh yeah,
case.
Damien Eccles was saying like he sat like I don't know 3 or 4 times and heard somebody sentence him to death like each time,
Oh,
and sat on death row for years, like, and it fucked him up pretty badly too. When he got out, it just I don't remember everything he said about it, but adjusting to normal life where you're not going to die anytime soon, that was hard for him to adjust to.
I
So
can't imagine.
yeah,
That was a horrible, horrible. Oh, that's one that sticks with me for sure.
oh yeah,
That was a brutal story. Those kids, man. Oof.
I didn't hear about it until many years after it all happened. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
don't think I did either. I think
I
they were.
watched the 3 documentaries, the Paradise Lost films,
Yep.
which I'd
Same.
recommend. They're really good to anyone who hasn't seen them before.
Definitely check those out. Me and Morgan are very young guys, so listen. Don't let us fool you. We're young. We're not young.
Okay, I got an animal abuse story. Is this gonna be too much?
Oh, go ahead.
You can handle it?
I can handle anything you throw at me, honey.
Okay.
Born ready.
Riverside, California.
Okay.
Authorities this morning arrested a Riverside man on a federal charge alleging that he slit the throat of his young dog,
Mm.
produced a short video of the dying puppy, and posted the video on his Snapchat account. Now, this Spanish name, do you know if it's spelled Angel? Is it pronounced Angel? Do you know that?
Angel. Yeah, Angel.
Okay, Angel Ramos Corrales, 19, was arrested without incident this morning by the FBI and the Riverside Police Department. And yeah, so he's named in a federal criminal complaint filed Friday that charges him with animal crushing. So there's a specific charge for that.
Mm.
Let me see.
How old is he?
He's 19.
Oh, this is a bad start.
This is probably a guy who
This
could
is
end
a
up
bad start right here, Morgan.
Oh yeah. So according to the affidavit in support of the affidavit in support of the complaint, the Riverside Police Department received a complaint on February 13th, soon after Ramos Corrales allegedly posted the video depicting their small brown dog with a large laceration on its neck. On the video, a person believed to be Ramos Corrales makes a series of statements, including, "I'm cold-hearted," and then he callously kicked the dog, who was still alive.
What?
Oh yeah.
What?
They said they found blood stains on the man's clothes, freshly cut wounds on his hand.
Oh no. We immediately need to take him into a psychiatric ward. That man's going to be a serial killer. Absolutely not. Nope.
Yeah, so there's just more details about the charges here.
All right, go.
So yeah, the dog was brought to a veterinarian, but they had to euthanize it because
Mm.
just too many injuries. Let me see. Purchased the puppy from Craigslist. So maybe Craigslist, they don't do much screening at all, do
Okay,
they?
first off, I'm going to pause you. Don't ever, 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 ever put an animal on Craigslist for sale or for free. If you don't know that already, now you fucking know it. Don't ever do that. Now you may proceed. Sorry, that was a public service announcement.
Well, that was like that serial killer I did the case for. It was in California. They called him the vampire. What the fuck's his name? The Santa Barbara? No, it's not Santa Barbara. The vampire.
There wasn't a
Sacramento.
Craigslist killer? There was a Craigslist killer too.
Richard Chase, though. That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
The vampire of Sacramento. So he went and bought animals from people who didn't screen, like selling rabbits and whatnot.
Exactly.
And went and killed them and drank their blood. But then there's this whole issue with animal shelters where they're asking you all these tough questions when you want to adopt an animal.
Oh.
And I know they're protecting the animals, and that's a good thing. But on the other hand, these questionnaires screen out maybe perhaps too many people, and that's why a lot of these animals get euthanized. So I don't know. It seems like there's no balance in that area.
Agreed.
Yeah. So I don't know. This next story would be very uncomfortable for you as a woman. It involves a plastic surgeon and things that he did to women. So let me see. Where does it start here? So yeah,
let me sit back and relax and hold on to my fake boobs.
Manny Gupta, 50, of Sylvania, Ohio, a former Toledo area plastic surgeon, pleaded guilty in federal court on Monday, April 26th, to sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and illegally dispensing a controlled substance. This plea is just one step in a long recovery process for the victim, whose courage and bravery should be commended. Mr. Gupta's acknowledgement of his heinous crimes now moves this matter to sentencing, where the government will be seeking a significant term of incarceration. Importantly, though, any additional victims of Mr. Gupta are encouraged to contact the FBI. Every victim of sexual violence deserves justice. Manish Gupta has now accepted responsibility for preying on, drugging, and sexually victimizing women. He misused his position of trust for his own sexual gratification. He will now be held accountable for his reprehensible criminal behavior. The FBI encourages anyone that was sexually victimized by him to contact the FBI at 1-877-FBI Ohio. So let me see. So according to court records, from on or about August 9th, 2016, through on or about September 24th, 2016, Gupta threatened, forced, and coerced a woman identified in the indictment as victim number 1 to engage in sexual acts. Without the victim's knowledge or consent, Gupta administered an incapacitating controlled substance to commit a crime of violence against her, namely rape. Gupta
was this in a home environment, or was this in a medical environment?
Let me see. So he traveled to medical conferences in large urban areas.
Okay.
Including Chicago, Cleveland, Miami, Florida, Fort Lauderdale, and Los Angeles. And he would stay at the hotels in these cities. He would hire escorts. Which is, I don't understand. I mean, if you're paying them, you get to have sex with them. That doesn't make sense.
Well, but he had a fetish. He didn't want it to be given willingly. He wanted to take it.
Yeah. So Dr. fucking Cosby.
Hi.
Administered
it's a little Cosby drink, darling.
Exactly. Administered incapacitating drugs to his victims and performing sexual acts of violence without their consent. So I mean, so like the fact that these are prostitutes means he didn't have to do that. So this is just a sickness. This is
exactly. This is a psychopathic. Yeah, this is an illness.
Just like with Cosby, like if you're a guy like Cosby and you're that rich and that famous, and in the 80s, if you recall, remember how big the Cosby Show was?
Oh, of course. I watched it every Thursday night with my family.
Me too. He was a household
every Thursday.
Oh yeah, he was like, as they say, America's favorite dad.
Yep.
So when you're a male who's that successful, you don't have to drug women. You can get women to have sex with you, but it must be the pathology of wanting to abuse women where you're drugging them and raping them. That must be the only explanation.
It's an interesting, and I think we should delve into that maybe in a future episode, into that psyche. It's an interesting thing, and that's what really one of the reasons I love true crime is what makes people, be that way.
Well,
what is it?
It's interesting because Richard Pryor's widow, Jennifer Lee Pryor, was saying that she wasn't surprised. She said he tried to fuck everything that moved. I actually know a woman who met Cosby because her ex-husband was he was a football player and later on a private football coach, and Cosby was going to hire him to coach his son, who had aspirations to be a football player.
Oof.
So she went with her husband to New York City and met Cosby, and the first thing he said to her was, "So you came to meet the king."
Oh, Jesus Christ. Get the fuck out of here.
So the arrogant, all
That's
that.
when I say, bye, bitch. Absolutely not.
So yeah, all that fame went to his head, right?
No. Be stronger.
Yeah. Well, I think that's not that it's excusable, but all that sexual harassment, like the kind that Harvey Weinstein inflicted on women, it must have its roots in having women throw themselves at you because you're rich and successful. But then you develop a feeling of entitlement where you think, well, they're all going to want to sleep with me. They all want to be with a rich guy.
Yeah.
And
Morgan, let me not lie. I'm a 40-year-old woman. I'm not completely unattractive. And there's an interesting thing with men and women. And, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. We are different beings. We're talking about the worst of the worst in our stories. These are people that are mentally not well. Some of us, me and you probably have mental problems, but we know how to deal with them properly. But men are still men and women are still women. When you come down to the nitty gritty of it. So I don't know where that line defines. I'm still trying to figure it out. We're still trying to evolve. We're not cavemen anymore. We want equal rights. We want to accept everybody no matter what. But I don't even know what the hell that looks like anymore.
Well, I read this thing about fame. It said whatever negative characteristics you have in your personality, it'll lead to them becoming accentuated and consolidated. So if you're like an arrogant prick, then you become even worse about that. And if you're lecherous toward women, then that gets worse too. But it doesn't help that you get groupies. So
right.
Most young men,
you get built up, yeah.
Yeah, most young men who fantasize about being a rock star or rap star or whatever it is, part of the fantasy is all the women who are going to want to have sex with you backstage, and it's not a lie. That's the way it is,
Right.
But it doesn't mean that every woman wants to have sex with you. So.
Right. Interesting. It's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, for sure. Well, on that note, I thank you very much to you and to our listeners. You did a very good job for your first episode.
So next episode, I'm going to be way more prepared because, like I said, Mama's got a lot of irons on the fire, but I'm very, very excited. I am absolutely thrilled to be given this opportunity. I hope that it goes well. I hope that the audience receives it well. I really do hope they get to see a side of you that I see. You are that calming, soothing voice, but you also have a little deeper, fun side. So I'm gonna bring it out of you.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, there's going to be a few more laughs. Like I have to be very careful in the usual episodes about humor. You can
exactly. And I don't mean to take any of I don't take my stories lightly whatsoever. But you know what? We are going to make fun of some things sometimes, but not the important things.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me tonight.
My pleasure.
All right. Have a good night now.
You as well, my dear.
It's Florida evening.
It is Florida evening. It is 11:20, and yes, my behind is heading to bed shortly.
Oh, okay.